Okay, I can't hear you. I might hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes. There's sound coming through right now. I can hear you.
Okay. So what do you know about the so what do you know about those plants?
Those plants? What kind of plants? Is that something you've sent me, or?
Uh yeah, then it's not the lemongrass I'm thinking of. It's a low cover grass. What it,
Yeah, I haven't heard about them. You haven't sent me anything. This is Niels.
Niels, I'm talking to the other students on the Skype. That's why it's sounding weird. Okay. But I'm
Okay.
texting you um on the Hangout. Can you see the texts?
Not at the moment. I need to go back to my computer. It's down in the lab.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just trying to see that the sound is working with this new
Okay.
mic, and it is, and it is in TINAP. And I think that if I've got Safari open, I'm logged in Jeremijenko,
Okay.
that this is logged in currently as TINAP, right? The X
No,
perform.
you're calling from Natalie Yermoljenko right now.
Uh, yeah, I'm trying to get the Hangout working on the other end. That's why I'm just um,
Oh,
um, so. Niels, can you say that again? That is actually I'm on the
you're calling from your own account, your own Google account, Natalie
again,
Yermoljenko. Yeah.
but I'm logged in as TINAP. I'm logged in as this is not a performance.
Okay, that's
Ay, ay,
weird.
ay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I'm
if you want, we can just delete the this is not a performance account and use your own account in
well, I
this
suppose that should go into the
upload
same.
plugin.
Yeah, but that's dumb because I'm logged in through I'm logged in as this is not a performance in Chrome, which was the way that, it, but now there's something overriding that. Um,
It might be if you're still logged in as Natalie Yermoljenko, if you have two accounts,
no, I wasn't. I was
sometimes.
logged in only as only on Chrome and only as this is not a performance.
Okay.
But for some reason it's not. It's still defaulting to the other one. Anyway, I'm going to just broadcast on this one for now because it's going and the students are on, and but the sound is working, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we
The
can
sound
figure out
is
how to upload it later. Okay. So I'm just leaving this on. You don't need uh, to be on. Okay.
okay.
Thanks, Niels.
No
Um,
problem.
can you? Sorry. Can you? I was just having some tech issues with. Can you show me what the grasses are? I mean, identifying these grasses. You think they're planted, or you think they're uh, native or volunteer organisms? Do you, do you have any images? So it's not a couch. It is actually, I would describe that as a plant, not a grass. But that's all over. That's actually trying to identify that. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out this. Okay. Can you do some searches now? I'll show you some. Because what organisms depend on those is our next question. You're not hearing me? Okay, hang on. People have multiplied. Hello, hello. So now can you hear me? Okay. Hello, you two. We were just going through some reviewing what organisms and updates on what you found, what else you found out about your parks, and doing some searches on. Do you understand this concept of volunteer organisms? What would you volunteer grasses might be, we might otherwise call them invasive, naturalized, or grasses that have gotten there themselves, right? They've volunteered themselves. So without putting on the negative judgment of an invasive or exotic species. This is something that has gotten there through its own volition, if you will, or reproductive cycles through seed rain or something else. So these are the organisms that are most interesting to us because we can learn from them, right? They teach us something important. What can we learn from these volunteer organisms that we can't learn from the organisms that we plant? Is that quiet, or am I not hearing? That was a question. Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, so you're just not answering the question? Is that what it is? What can we learn from volunteer organisms that we can't learn from organisms that we've planted? The ones that have gotten there themselves. Right, and what are they typically called, these volunteer organisms? Weeds, exactly. And one man's weed is another one's true love. So this idea that we can learn a great deal from how natural systems work when they're not being controlled by humans, planted, designed by landscape architects and the Parks Department, I would argue is the most important thing to look at, because not only are they demonstrating their own survivorship, right, that they can survive in, the very specific conditions, and maybe the high lead levels, and maybe the high cadmium levels in the soil, and maybe the pollutant load. We're talking about one of the grasses that trying to identify some of the grasses. What else does it tell us about not only that they can survive, but that they can get there, right? So how did they get there? Who put them there? That's always the great mystery of plants, right? Because they have to get there somehow. So was it through seed rain? Was it through wind? Was it through some other mechanism? How did the do you have a theory about how that particular grass got there? You said there's more than one of the you showed the picture. Is it there? You don't think interesting. There's a very interesting. I was talking about the aphrodisiacs. There's an interesting one that I'm looking at the moment. It might be rabbit tobacco for making the. Have a look at rabbit tobacco. Indigenous used it in a number of different ways. The simple pleasure of rabbit tobacco. Apparently it's all over the Alabama youngsters grew up smoking rabbit tobacco. Can be smoked for respiratory ailments or made into relaxing tea. A common tobacco substitute used by young boys in rural areas. That's very funny. Has anybody seen any of this rabbit tobacco in your green spaces? Pretty interesting. It's actually a powerful antiviral. So it's interesting that antivirals are often this is something in medical research where we're actually looking a great deal for antivirals, because you would know that the 20th century was the time of the antibacterial, right? The penicillins and the related antibacterial. Antivirals are much more difficult. Can you hear me? Sorry? Antiviral? No, a virus is very different from a bacteria, right? Bacterial infections versus virus infections. And has anybody been on a potent antiviral therapy? Most viruses you can't treat, right? Because there isn't any antiviral. It's a very different realm. So antibacterial and antiviral, very different. Antiviral we've been looking in the modern pharmacopoeia at indigenous and plant-based substances, and they work more typically not through killing the bacteria, but through enhancing the immune system. Is this a? Am I? How much? Has anybody ever had a serious infection? I'm looking at you. None of you have. Okay. Anybody got any passing interest in kind of the paradigms of medical health? Any of you at all vaguely interested in being pre-med? No? Well, nonetheless, understanding the body as an ecology is a fundamental way to understanding larger ecologies. So it's not just the kind of illness metaphor. It's looking at how ecosystems work. And it's in this idea that our own bodies are ecosystems, right? So let me go back a bit. You've all heard of the Human Microbiome Project? No. Can you look that up? I mean, this is the big paradigm for the contemporary age. You know that you're more non-human than you are human. If we counted the number of cells in your body, that you're less than half human, and more of you is non-human. That is bacteria and a few little viruses. Viruses are a really interesting phenomenon. We're not quite sure if they're alive or not. Bacteria are. Anybody had your high school debate about is a virus alive? Does anybody have a position on viruses and life? You don't hear me. Yeah. Fernando, can you text if you can? Can you hear me? So you understand that what defines life? Is the virus aware? Is it a complex organism? It can reproduce. Is that enough to define life? What is alive? What is life? Who would give a working definition of life? Come on, anyone. You've got to have a working definition of life. Movement. So a river is alive. Water is alive. Is a rock alive? A rock is formed and unformed. There's a cycle. I sent a couple of right. So I just sent a definition of virus. Viruses straddle the definition of life. They lie somewhere between supramolecular complexes and very simple biological entities. Viruses contain some of the structures and exhibit some of the activities that are common to organic life, but they're missing many of the others. In general, viruses are entirely composed of single strands of genetic information encased with a protein capsule. Viruses lack most of the internal structure and machinery which characterize life, including biosynthetic machinery that is necessary for reproduction. In order for a virus to replicate, it must infect a suitable host cell. So a recent article in Popular Science would argue that, in fact, viruses are alive, that it's more than movement, it's but what we really don't understand, and what scientists have struggled with since the study of virology began, is whether viruses are actually living or not. A paper published in Science Advances just might change that by creating a reliable method of studying viruses' long evolutionary history, hitherto nearly impossible. Researchers have found new evidence that strongly suggest viruses are indeed living entities. So, so somewhere between a rock or a molecule and sentient life. Because individual viruses don't carry translational machinery, namely the proteins needed to read their DNA and RNA and build new viruses, they invade cells and hijack the genetic tools to do it for them. But developments in virology have started to reveal that more and more the viruses might in fact be alive. One was the discovery of mimiviruses, giant viruses with large genetic libraries that are even bigger than some bacteria. So some viruses, like Ebola, have as few as 7 genes. Some of the giants have genes and proteins required for translation. So it's a complicated thing of where and how we define life. And what's interesting is that the most important antivirals that we are finding are from the cornucopia of our old indigenous knowledge of plants. So revisiting that, both the all of the aphrodisiacs that I've been investigating for love caller have antiviral properties. So what does that tell you? Aphrodisiacs are antiviral. Has anybody got a theory of kissing? Why do we kiss? Yeah, you know, yeah, it's the exchange of bodily fluids. We're inoculating each other. We're sharing immune information, and that kind of oral exchange. Do you know any other organisms that do it? They don't. Actually, they don't kiss. They don't kiss. It's a very, very human behavior. Baby birds, right, and avian fledgling relationships, right? Birds will often feed each other, which is an oral exchange, but they don't tend to kiss. Anyway, it's an interesting behavior. The other behavior that seems to be uniquely human, and why we have an interesting ecology of... First of all, did you look up the microbiome? Can someone give me a definition of the human microbiome? Okay, so in your elbow crease, the human microbiome has told us that there's about 9 unique species that only live in the crease of elbows of people, right? Isn't that sweet? Your elbow crease is a niche ecology. You've heard about prebiotics and probiotics for your gut bacteria, right? And how important they are for digestive health, right? But this idea that you are a geography, a landscape for other organisms, right? That's a profoundly interesting shift in the human-centric idea and our traditional notions of health, right? Where we're enclosed little individuals that we keep the germs out, right? Which is the germ theory of health, right? What does the human microbiome view tell us? That we need these germs, right? They're mainly good germs, yeah? That we're filled with germs. In fact, we have more germs in our bodies, in our healthy bodies, than we have human cells, right? This is a profoundly important idea that shifts our entire cultural imagination on its head. I mean, turns it on its head, or shifts it. So this understanding that we are an ecology ourselves, right, is very different from where an individual organism, where our skin can't be pierced by, that we're defending against all these germs. In fact, what are we in? A mutualistic relationship, right? Very different from how, bad germs, silver bullet, kill all the organisms that live inside you. The whole paradigm of hygiene, right? Where do we get superbugs? Yes, yeah, and from hospitals, from the so-called hygienic environments where we have killed the healthy microbial community and given rise to a pathogenicity. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of projects. Let me, where I tried to make this idea clear. Because it's, I think, a very important idea to get into our heads and to start thinking about our local green spaces and designing as if biodiversity and diverse organisms are our friends. So I'm going to, Fernando, share screen. Can you tell me? Sorry. Fernando, can you see that? Yeah? Okay. So, you guys, what does this look like? Well, I'll tell you. It's a perch. It's a perch that I designed and have installed in a number of museums around the world. Here it is in Mass Mocha, and here it is in, golly, if my machine is working. Maybe it's not. Okay, I seem to have a frozen machine. Let me just tell you while it's frozen and waiting to respond, is that this is up on a telephone pole that you can see in Mass Mocha. I installed this in the Whitney Museum in the sculpture court. And so birds land on this handy perch, right? And you can see that inside that cast acrylic form is a strain gauge at the top where the perch is, and a speaker, right? So they trigger sound. Actually close a couple of things so we've got a little bit more processor. I'm going to close this guy. I'm actually going to close Chrome, which, let's see if that works. I'm going to close this one. Okay, so let me try that again. So when a bird lands on it, it'll play something like this. Oh, come on. Yeah. No, it's actually I think Keynote is not playing. I'm gonna quickly call you back. In the meantime, can the rest of you okay, look, that's going again. Let's try this.
What you need to do.
Golly. Okay.
Here's what you need to do. Go down there and buy some of those health food bars, the ones you call bird food, and bring it here and scatter it around. There's a good person.
Right, you understand that? So the bird has landed on this and it triggers that sound file. Yeah?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Okay. Did you hear the sound file? You did, okay. Okay. How about we just do it this way? It's less clear. So this is another one of the perches. So when I installed it in the Whitney, the old Whitney Museum, underneath the perches I had this. Can you see this twirly thing? You can see a better picture of the twirly thing here in the corner. Can you see that? So here are these perches around in these two images on the corner. Why would I put this twirl thing underneath the perch, underneath this perch? For the what? Exactly. Exactly. Perfect. It's a public toilet for pigeons, right? Because why don't people like pigeons? Because they poop, right? So we could just create a this twirl is actually it shows you the surface area. It gives you surface area, but it also is plumbing. It's like a pipe in that it's high density polyethylene, ultra high molecular weight. So it's very smooth. So every morning the moisture collects on it, and the poop, instead of sticking on there, kind of works its way down the screw into a little bottle of pigeon poop, right? Pigeon poop actually becomes the most, if you understand soil nutrients, pigeon poop has an NPK balance of 777. So that's what you would buy in if you've ever done, anybody fertilized a rose garden, you usually use NPK 777 that you buy commercially to fertilize your plants, right? So pigeon poop turns out to be perfectly balanced soil conditioner, right? Soil fertilizer. Instead of getting petrochemical fertilizers, we can use pigeon poop. And if we collect it and put it in the right place. So in fact, during the Iraq War, I did these public toilets for pigeons, and we put the pigeon poop into a carrot garden, and then we made carrot soup. So pigeon carrot soup, but there was no actual pigeons in it. It was just carrots fertilized with pigeon poop, you understand. Served pigeon carrot soup, and that was the most delicious soup. But in order to rehearse a ceremony in which we had a peace declaration with the pigeons, right? Because pigeons or doves are the symbol of peace, right? Anybody heard that? So to have a peace declaration with pigeons, Columbi, that's a dove, right? Seemed obvious, and we had a ceremony where we ate pigeon carrot soup, understanding they're an essential part of the nutrient cycle that produces healthy urban soils and delicious carrot soup. But so the pigeons, in the case of these perches, to understand our urban environment as a functioning urban environment, in this case, the pigeons were able to jump onto the various different perches that were around and be able to trigger different sound files. So if you will, the pigeons were experimenting on people, right? They were deciding whether or not this argument, this sound file, triggered more cooperative behavior in people than this one. So in the Whitney installation, this particular perch and the argument that it had on it was the most popular by a long way, by about 5 to 1. And this particular perch played the following. When it was landed on, oh, actually, hang on. Let me go back again. So it played this sound file. So pigeon would land on it, and then you'd hear this.
Tick, tick. That's the sound of genetic mutations, of the avian flu becoming a deadly human flu. Do you know what slows it down? Healthy subpopulations of birds, increasing biodiversity generally. It is in your interests that I am healthy, happy, well-fed. Hence, you could share some of your nutritional resources instead of monopolizing them. That is, share your lunch.
Okay. Did you understand that? Why do you think you could hear that?
I cannot hear you.
You can't hear me? Could you hear the sound file? You could, but now you can't hear me. Fernando, if you can just type so that I can hear. So just to confirm. Okay, so I'm presuming that you can hear me again. Yes? Okay, why do you think the pigeons preferred that perch? And that argument. Is that an argument that you know? There's kind of, to get that argument, I've found, and maybe it's common knowledge for you, I think it should be common knowledge, but I found that most people don't understand that our health depends on healthy pigeons. Right, that if we have starving, immune-challenged pigeons, we're not in a healthy urban environment, right? And And in fact, the interdependency with our health and animal health is very intimate. And in fact, that this idea that avian flu, where did avian flu come from? Sorry, there's some clicking going on. It's what did you say? Where did it come from? Fernando, can you type? I can't hear the answer. Yeah, it did. It came from birds, avian flu. Yes. So, but which sort of birds? Chickens, yes. And what about swine flu? Where did swine flu come from? Pigs, right. And do you know how many chickens there are in the world compared to humans? Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of chickens. Where are those chickens living? In big chicken farms, right? So huge amounts of chickens living in confined contexts, huge amounts of genetically very similar chickens living in confined contexts, inside huge sheds, right? You've seen these chicken farms. Can somebody look up some chicken farms to show some images of some industrialized chicken farming? And actually, can somebody else look up some industrialized pig farming? In Denmark, have a look at the pig farming in Denmark if you want to see some awful practices. Danish pigs, well, they're interesting. So just share some images among you. Show me that you've found something, yeah, of what industrialized chicken farming looks like. Has anybody found any interesting images? Right. Okay, so if you have a look at that, that's what I would call, from an ecosystem science perspective, a cauldron of pathogenicity, right? That's how we make viruses very pathogenic. Because if the pigs are running around in the wild and they get a virus that is, evolving with them in their population, but if that virus gets really, really pathogenic, it's going to kill the pig really quickly, and it won't have any time to infect any other pigs, right? So it won't be able to propagate. So wild, biodiverse contexts give you this natural limit to pathogenicity. Viruses, organisms don't get that pathogenic. But in a context like you've shown, anyone got some chicken farming images? Oh dear. So yeah, the whole thing that little baby male chickens are just mashed into cornmeal as soon as they're born in order to feed back to the chickens, because they don't want those sweet little baby chickens. And that's because we create these cauldrons of pathogenicity, right? A lot of organisms that are genetically similar in stress conditions, living close to each other, without UV light, which is a natural sterilizer, in these big sheds. And what does that mean? That if a virus gets really pathogenic, it'll just jump from one to the other, to the other, to the other, and it'll propagate very easily. There's no limits on pathogenicity in industrialized food production. So with avian flu, every single confirmed identification of UNEP actually slaughtered thousands of wild birds. which I thought was insane because, of course, they didn't understand while the wild birds could take this get infected and migrate with it and transmit it, it's not the source, right? Every single identified bird positively identified with avian flu was within a 5-kilometer radius of an industrialized or intensified chicken farm, right? And the same with swine flu. So Ebola, does anybody know where Ebola came from? No. The theory of the action of actually like to read this. So I'll send you some things to read. This really the challenge of should about this is just the biggest threat to health outside of pollution and contaminants is disease. Okay.
Oh, the Ebola bat? Must be, yeah. Actually, that's a fruit bat, so. She really pushed so fast. There's Stella Luna. Anybody? It's like a child's bat, but yeah, so good. She's the bats in some ways. They're usually not like that. That little time. They actually have evolutionary traces with all along. You know that wings are also evolutionary, you can trace them back to like hands. Because like yeah. And they like webbed feet and stuff. Maybe they started flying underground and then they got outside. Yeah. So cute.
I like listening to you talk about this. I'm actually on a different Skype, trying to get this one working. But so you're getting the idea, right? That that we've designed industrialized food production systems to increase pathogenicity, and that now we have to design our ecosystems to maximize the biodiversity in order to address this. The example of Ebola is really complex and interesting and not yet confirmed, but Ebola comes from particular regions in Africa where there's been the most forest fragmentation. The bats have become, because of loss of habitat, forest fragmentation, they've moved into human environments, and so the intensified bat-human virus exchange has occurred. And this is the theory that it's forest fragmentation that's led to close cohabitation of bats and humans and the transmission of Ebola virus, which is why the cola nut, which is a forest-based agricultural product, to put the cola back in cola, if we incentivize if we make it profitable for the forest edge dwellers to actually sell cola nuts, to put them back into cola, right? Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. Why would that be a good idea, putting the cola nuts back in cola, as opposed to the synthetic caffeine that we use as the source of cola? This is the reason why colas are called colas. Sugary caffeinated drinks are called colas, is because of the cola nut, which was in West Africa the party drug, right? It was the drink, the ceremonial drink for any gathering, because it had, what do you think cola nut has in it? Caffeine and 200 other phytochemicals or something. Like coffee, it's got a lot of caffeine. It actually has more caffeine than coffee. And coffee doesn't only have caffeine in it, right? Is coffee good for you? Probably the antioxidants that come from this plant-based food are great for you. So they've not been able to demonstrate that coffee or tea, because the plant-based tannins are full of antioxidants. Similarly for cola nut extract, right? It has the caffeine in it, but it has 200 other phytochemicals. So if we put the cola nut back into cola, we put caffeine in, but we put all these other antioxidants in it as well, right? Are you still hearing me?
We'll miss you.
Okay.
Now it's working. Now it's working.
Okay, I'm going back into here. I'm trying a different version of Skype. So I just want to get that you understand this fundamental concept of, if our industrialized food production systems have produced pathogenicity. How do we prevent that? How do we now learn from that? How do we design our food systems and our urban spaces? What's the best protection we have against that kind of pathogenicity?
Getting rid of the close quarters where those products or animals are kept. Like going back to small business, yeah.
What you're pointing to, yes, is biodiversification, the value of biodiversity in our urban systems, right? It's actually biodiversity that's protecting us from pathogenicity. It's actually healthy microbial communities that would have protected us against superbugs in the hospital, because they were all killed and the ecosystem was simplified, right? Getting out it meant that the baddies, the ones that were pathogenic, could really, were not held in check. So a biodiverse system is a healthier system from this molecular, viral, microbial point of view. It's a healthier system from a leaf area index point of view as well, right? Because we have more nutrients flowing. It's a healthier system because it produces more biomass, a biodiverse, the same plot of land, and they've done a beautiful study with this in long-term ecological research studies in the grasslands around Chicago, Midwest, where highly productive farming land, right? If you take a square and put just wheat or some grass that we want to eat on it, and then we take that same square and we put these diverse meadow plain grasses on it, which one do you think produces more biomass?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So if you have two plots of land, the same plots of land on the plains of Illinois, very productive farmland, right? You plant one of them with wheat or corn, and it's just corn on it, and you kill all the weeds, you put pesticides on it to make sure that there's no other non-commercial plant in there. And then beside it, you have a prairie grassland full of biodiverse organisms, which will produce more biomass. If you were just measuring the amount of life produced, which one would produce more? The what?
The second one.
You're right, and that's been a very important finding. That's only long-term ecological research studies that have been done, and it's not yet well understood that we can also increase yield through biodiversification. So it won't be yield of wheat; it will be yield of diverse organisms, right? So then the challenge for us, the cultural challenge for us, is how to use those diverse organisms for our benefit. So biodiversification protects us from diseases. It increases the leaf area index to improve air quality. It increases the yield so that we can have biodiversified, more complex, nutrient-driven foodstuffs instead of simple calories. And we get a healthier ecosystem. The ecosystem and the human body are not separable, right? We are interacting ecosystems. Inside you is an ecosystem of lovely little bugs, good germs as they're called. So this whole idea of biodiversity is a really fundamental concept for the 21st century, right? Because zoonotic diseases, Ebola, swine flu, avian flu, Zika virus, all of these things that are coming through are the major source of new diseases, right? And they're all from simplified ecosystems, forest fragmentation, industrialized farming. So that's a big idea. It's a big idea that I want you to express in your little green spaces too. So let's keep going around and start, see if we can do some more identification of the organisms that have volunteered into your spaces, or not volunteered, the ones that are planted, and how they're thriving or not thriving. Okay. Did you want to talk a little bit more about your green space? Did you notice any birds or any insects?
Yeah, it was the typical, I think, house sparrow is what it's called, which I actually researched, and they were brought over in 1851. There were 15 of the sparrows brought, and then they brought 100 the next year, and then they just multiplied, and now they're just everywhere. So that's the little sparrows that you see everywhere. There were a ton of them.
Actually, it's interesting. There's something called the great sparrow decline that's happened in the last 10, 15 years. Has anybody heard of it? Because of this Shakespeare festival where they brought the sparrows over, because I think in Macbeth, so you're not allowed to say that in a performing in a theater, right? Anyway, remember he says there's special providence in the fall of a sparrow. Let me look that up. Oh no, it's not Macbeth. I was wrong. Good. It's actually Hamlet. So we can say Hamlet. Can we? Which is the one we're supposed to be superstitious about? Does anybody know? If you're a performance person, you're not supposed to utter the name of that. Horatio, if your mind is like anything, obey it. I will forestall their repair hither, and say you are not fit. Hamlet, not a whit, we defy augury. There is special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all, since no man of aught he leaves knows what is to leave betimes. Let be. Okay, so this is this idea of looking for signs in sparrows. And in fact, the Greeks did it a great deal. I heard a funny story about they actually used their chickens, sacred chickens, for their signs. If the chickens actually ate heartily, then it was a good sign, and they would go into war and they would win the war. And if they didn't, so they had to revise this because they started doing these marine battles on ships, and the chickens wouldn't eat well because the chickens got seasick. So the greatest defeat between Troy and Rome was when the captain got very angry with these chickens that wouldn't eat heartily and threw the sacred chickens overboard, and Troy was defeated terribly, according to the sacred chickens. Anyway, this idea of looking for signs in natural systems is as old as human literature. And what's happened in the last 15 years in London, they're down to two breeding pairs. In 2009, there was 2 breeding pairs in London Tower of sparrows. There's been a 99% population decline. In New York City, there was an 80% population decline. In most big cities around the world, we'd seen this huge precipitous drop of sparrows. What did that mean? Anybody got a theory? I mean, how old is Shakespeare? Right? Sparrows have cohabited with humans for a very long time, right? We have tremendous evidence of our close cohabitation because why? Why do sparrows live with humans in urban centers, in your green space?
Is it because of the food dropping things and like trash?
Well, yeah, there's it's an active ecosystem with a lot of food. Have you ever, on LaGuardia Place, there's a little French bakery, and that's where the sparrows hang out a lot, actually. The crumbs, because you'll see that the croissants are very good there, and they're very crumbly, and there's always crumbs around. And yeah, we share nutritional resources, as the perches were showing. We eat the same